No one here on this podcast can make a deal, but anybody with any street savvy out there knows you're in prison, you're serving time, you have information about a homicide. Guess what? You can work yourself out a deal with the DA's office, whomever, to get the right person
I'll tell you, Jim.
behind bars for this case.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Cold Red. I'm Ray Carr, and with me always is Fitz. Fitz, tell me what is going on tonight. I'm not really sure, but fill me in on what we're doing tonight.
Well, Ray, you and I have been together for over 100 episodes now on Cold Red. And of course, how many dozens of cases have we worked together or assisted in our FBI days, and even since then. But I'm telling our audience up front that this will be the toughest Cold Red I've had to do. And we've talked about a lot of serious cases and serial rapists, serial murderers, single murders. But tonight's episode is about a murder of a friend of mine. Way back in 1998, his name was Joe Welsh. He was the younger brother of a very good friend of mine, John Welsh. I was in his wedding. He was in my wedding. So tonight, I'm working with the Philly PD. We're reinvestigating this case, and there's a reward putting up that's out there now of $25,000. And we're going to get into the facts of the case a little bit coming up. But we also have a guest, and I'm going to introduce him. His name is Larry Sechuk, and he is the chairman of the Citizens Crime Commission located in Philadelphia. So I'll stop right there for now and say, Larry, welcome to Cold Red.
Jim and Ray, thank you very much for having me. I'm very happy to join you, gentlemen, and to discuss this case regarding Joe Welsh. We at the Citizens Crime Commission really focus on these type of situations because we don't believe that there isn't a case that can't be solved. It just comes down to the amount of focus and pressure and how much you publicize it in the general public, that at some point you do loosen the gravel and you do get some information. But you have to be very tenacious to do that, and that's what our organization does. We're relentless in tracking leads down and communicating information to the police and working with the general public. Let me tell you that the Citizens Crime Commission, the way we are set up, consider us a bridge between the general public and police departments. We gather information from the general public anonymously, and they take that information and we deliver it to the police for action. Based on the information that the police get and whether or not they could take it to a conclusion and a successful prosecution, the individual who gave us that information anonymously will receive an award. And we pay that out. And the way in which we do that is through, naturally, we have to create a level of funding. And the way we do that is through partnerships with corporations and individuals and government agencies as well. And we have a couple fundraisers that we do so that we could always ensure that we have money that we could pay out whenever we come across a case and there's good information and we could have an arrest take place. As the chairman of the Citizens Crime Commission, my responsibility is for the overall development and growth of the organization. I focus on enhancing our partnerships as well as developing them with agencies and the public sector. I really am focused on trying to make us a more of a proactive group so we could be on the front end of crime problems, violent crimes, versus always putting information out about a homicide. So I've been working with a number of different organizations, and part of my responsibility is to develop an outreach program where we can develop different types of diversion programs for youths in organizations that are out there that specialize in trying to divert individuals from going into violence and drug abuse. So this is a new arena for us to get into because we've always been on the back end of it. And my feeling is if we could be on the front end of it, we could probably reduce some of the things that we are putting on television for information. One of the big levers that we pull each week is what's called Crime Stoppers. It's broadcast on WPVI TV 6 And the anchor is Rick Williams, who handles it. He is one of the station's main anchors, and he does the voiceover for the various cold cases that we air on that program. And it airs on Saturday nights and Sundays, and we really focus on trying to get the public during key times when we know that they're watching television. And really, Sunday mornings is a great time because everybody's tuned to news programs, and so we pop up and our information's out there, and we do get a lot of calls. And then, look, I'll tell you, some of the calls sound exciting, but then when we vet it, we realize that there's no way that this information could possibly be true. And even though we feel that way, we still converse with the police and collaborate with them, and they usually validate what we have kind of researched and developed on our end. So it's really an ongoing effort to just keep the public aware of these situations and to make ourselves visible by attending different public events, by making sure that we go to areas where people don't expect us to be, to have outreach and have them believe in the program that we have and that we can help make a difference in their lives and hopefully avert problems for other people as well.
You know, Larry, it's called the Citizens Crime Commission, and for a reason. It involves citizens, and it sounds like in the past you were more or less reactive, and you still are to some degree, but you're also proactive now from what you were saying, and you're trying to go out to these various communities, maybe with younger people, and talk to them. And just up front here, the TV station, Channel 6, WPVI, that's a Philadelphia station. And I know this, our Cold Red goes nationwide and actually worldwide. And so not everyone will be able to watch this Saturday night or Sunday morning, but WPVI has a website, and so does the Citizens Crime Commission. And Larry, do you know that? We'll put that out up front here, then we'll come back to some things. What is the
Yeah.
website?
The website is www.citizenscrimecommissionoftheDelawareValley.com.
Okay. So I'm assuming this information, by the way, I've already shot, as they say, or recorded the Crime Stoppers. That's about to air Saturday night and again Sunday morning. But then it's on the Channel 6 website in Philly, and which of course you can access worldwide, and certainly on the Citizens Crime Commission also. And we're going to have it on our Cold Red podcast too, and our various social media outlets once we're there. Ray, anything you want to throw in here? Have you ever
I
worked
do.
with the Citizens Crime Commission, Ray?
Actually, I have. When I was in Philadelphia, I remember this case vividly, Jim, because when it happened, you called me because I was in Philadelphia to be able to assist in that. But I want our listeners to know, and I want our listeners to know that listen to Channel 6 News on Saturday and Sunday, that the goal really of this episode right here is to help generate leads. So no piece of information is too trivial. Every piece of information could be important because it's part of a puzzle. And we're hoping that our community, the citizens of the Philadelphia area and beyond, can provide information that might bust this cold case wide open.
And we're going to get into the crime itself in a bit, but I want to go back to Larry. And you gave us some nice upfront information about, I'm going to call it CCC, Citizens Crime Commission, Triple C, save some syllables there. But if I read it right, you've been around since the mid 1950s or so, not you necessarily,
Yeah.
but the commission.
Sometimes I feel that way.
Well, we all do. Well, actually, I have been around since then. Ray is much, much younger, he likes to tell people. But tell us a bit about the history of the Crime Commission and perhaps other cases that were resolved through it.
Yeah, we've been around since 1954. We started out as um, a organization that worked hand in hand with the police, and over the years, because of the saturation that we were able to have with the general public, the Philadelphia Police Department thought it was worthy to have detectives assigned to the Citizens Crime Commission. That really was a good help in terms of vetting information. Right now, I don't want to overlook two guys that do a lot of heavy lifting there. They're former Philadelphia police officers. There's the John Appledorn, who's president of the organization, and John is a retired homicide captain in Philadelphia, and he was in the homicide unit during the mob wars of the 80s.
Mhm.
when there was a big struggle between John Stanfa and Joey Merlino for
Nicky
the
Scarfo.
power of the Nicky Scarfo over the power of who's going to be the power person in the Philadelphia crime family. So John had a lot of experience in dealing with them and handling a lot of homicides. And then the other one that I don't want to forget is Santi Montecava. And Sandy was a detective in the Philadelphia Police Department, and he has a lot of experience with gangs and dealing with gang violence and dealing with a lot of street drugs. And so when you put these two guys together, it really helps in terms of having an organization that's very believable, and that we're not an organization that has a lot of buffs, if you know what I mean by buffs working in it. We have people that, have done the job and know what it is to have boots on the ground to try to solve a problem. So, these guys, whatever comes through, it's not the first time at the rodeo for them. So in terms of vetting information, they're experts at it. So we then have branched off into developing relationships with the media. And so Channel 6 was one of the first organizations, and still is the one that we go to. And we have had a long-standing relationship with them. And I will tell you that a lot of the cases that we air, we have a good hit rate in terms of information that come into the police. I would say that we historically have been able to move about 35% of information successfully that would lead to prosecutions to the police. Now understand, that's a good number, because you got to understand the people that are calling sometimes they don't know anything and they're just calling to, waste your time and to just, kind of just talk to somebody because you're there. But I say when you get down to like a 35% success rate, and sometimes it'll bump up to 40%. I think that's pretty good. So because that goes to the screening of the information that we have that we forward to them, to the police. So it really works well, and not only do we work with Philadelphia, we work with Camden County, which is a very tough neighborhood. City of Camden, it's a very difficult place to operate. We handle Delaware County, we handle Chester, Pennsylvania, and we do have a lot of reach in the Philadelphia, in the greater Philadelphia area, out to Lehigh Valley. We extend a little bit out to Harrisburg. So, and we have stretches far down as the Maryland area, the upper point of Maryland, and in through Delaware down there, Newcastle County, and those areas. And we have we have a very good reputation. And I'll tell you that whenever we call police organizations, and I was on the phone today making some phone calls, and there's an old saying, people like to say, they know individuals. And I always say, how you have a contact, it's not by you saying you have a contact, it's by the person you're calling if they know you. If the person knows you, then you have a contact. I will tell you that when I call and when Sandy or John calls, we get calls back from the chief, the commissioner. It's not like, our calls go unanswered. If they can't pick up right away, we hear back from them within a couple hours. So there's a high level of respect that we have out there in the law enforcement community. And it's only because of the professionalism that we exercise and the posture that we have with our various events that we perform. We have this one event that we put on every year. It's called Law Enforcement Appreciation Day.
Mhm.
It happens in May, and what we do is we reach out to the various counties that we cover, and we ask the police departments to send in information on officers who deserve recognition for heroism or valor. And so what happens is we get a lot of information on different officers that they feel need to be moved forward and recognize what their journey was. And so what we do is we have a committee of police chiefs and commissioners, and we go through these awards. And so at the end of it, we choose 23, sometimes 24 officers that are worthy of this award. And we also honor any officer in the areas that we cover that may have been killed in the line of duty. So we'll recognize their family and have them at this event. We usually get about 500 to 600 people that attend this event, and it's at the Bellevue Hyatt, and we have the main ballroom. It's covered by media, ABC, CBS, the local stations there, NBC. They cover it because it's such a big event, and there's the people that attend are elected officials, judges, people from the private sector, and individuals who just want to be involved and understand what has happened. We also recognize a citizen who has gone above and beyond in terms of protecting their community or working with the police to solve a problem. So we try to make sure that we encompass everyone that is involved in doing a job and making your neighborhood or making the environment that you live in safe. And by doing that recognition, we feel that that really encourages others to step up and take some action when needed. And so what happens is these officers, each one of their journeys is read by Rick Williams, who hosts the event, and they receive an award, and it's presented by the commission. And we usually make sure that we celebrate this award with their families as well, because we want to make sure the families understand that we appreciate the sacrifice that that whole family's making by that one person who is out there every day protecting us and really putting their life on the line, and is really not sure if they're going to come home at the end of their shift. So families that have that situation that they live with, they need to be recognized and they need to be held up as doing things that are beyond belief in terms of what we normally encounter and what we experience in our own lives.
Before you go, Jim, I just want to say I know Sandy very well, and I know Apples very well, too. I know him very well. Larry, I'm also a product of winning one of your awards. I forget the year. You have to forgive me of that, but I won a gold medal that was awarded to me by the Citizens Crime Commission for investigative work. And I was very, very touched. And you're right. It was an amazing event, and I was a product of that. So I can speak firsthand in reference to that.
Yeah,
Well, let's hope.
Jim, if you happen to be in the Philadelphia area and I could send you the date that we're scheduled, I believe it's May 21st, but I could send you the correct date. I don't have it in front of me. But if you're in the area, by all means, we'd love you to come and experience this. It's quite a moving event when you hear each officer's journey. And I'll tell you, a lot of these are just not, simple situations. I remember one year, everyone who was up there that got an award, it was a gunfight. And it's like, you got to be kidding me. And, they were pinned down. And it's like, this is happening in a city where you have people living. And you just wonder, how does this go on? And how does this person take raise their hand and take the oath to be out there protecting the citizens, and they're there in a gunfight, hiding behind their car, and you just scratch your head and you say, "My God, I hope that we find more people that have that level of compassion and service to the public." It's just moving to hear these awards these stories that Rick reads, and we then present them with this award. Sometimes, it's like when you listen to it, you say, man, okay, maybe the words are a little hollow based on what you're hearing. But nonetheless, it's a level of recognition that they so appreciate and everyone respects tremendously.
Well, I would like to go to that ceremony, and maybe Ray too. We could represent Cold Red sometime in May, and I'm hoping it's there. When I'm there, it's for 24 or so officers who earned it, and they're there to receive the award, as was Ray a number of years ago. I hope it's not for any officer's family who was killed in the line of duty. And let's hope that last person you described, who sometimes gets an award, even if anonymously, is the one who helped us solve the Joe Welsh homicide. And that is what I would like to talk about from this point on.
Before
But
we
go ahead,
move to
Larry.
that, Jim,
Yeah,
I want to make sure that you and Ray have an invitation to come to this Law Enforcement Appreciation Day luncheon.
Well, thank you.
thank you. As of now, we'll mark it on our calendar and we'll be there.
I'll put
And
it down.
perhaps let's hope we're lucky this year and someone can help us solve the Joe Welsh case and get the $25,000 reward. And maybe that's a reward. This would be an award from the Citizens Crime Commission. Ray, you put together some questions. Um, in a way, a little unusual, but you're sort of interviewing me here. But I know this case. I know you know it pretty well too. And
Hmm.
Larry, we're going to ask you to chime in anytime it's appropriate for you to do that. But again, this is not easy for me to talk to. I know I have Joe's family members listening, if not live later on, and other friends and family members. Joe was a very popular guy. And let me just say, I'll start this with, I grew up in the Olney neighborhood around 3rd and Edro. The Welsh family, 5 boys, grew up at 7th and Godfrey. The running joke was they either worked for the government or God. One brother, Pete, is a priest. Other oldest brother, Jim, worked for license and inspection. John Welsh was a firefighter. He's my best friend. We're the same age, certainly of the Welsh family. Joe was the next younger brother, also worked for Department of License and Inspections. He was an inspector there. And the youngest brother Danny worked for the Postal Service. So a stand-up family. The oldest one, Jim, died of natural causes, and of course Joe was murdered, died before any of them in 1998. John Welsh, my friend, I was in his wedding, he was in mine. We had talks before I entered the police academy and he entered the fire academy in Philadelphia, and we would half joke but half serious say to each other, I'd say, John, I don't want to ever get burnt in a fire. I hate fire. I don't want anything bad to happen. John would say to me, well, I don't ever want to get shot. It's not a good thing either. Ironically, and not in a good way, in the 1978 MOVE confrontation, John was one of the firefighters in West Philadelphia. And when the guys were shooting from the MOVE compound, he was shot in the neck with a shotgun. And fortunately, he was at far distance. They did penetrate his neck, several pellets, and went to the hospital, but he was okay then and okay now. But even more ironic, and even in a worse way, 20 some years after that, give or take, was his brother Joe's murder in either East Oak Lane or Upper Olney. It goes by both names. Philadelphia's if you're not from this area, Philadelphia is an area, a city of neighborhoods. And Joe had some training that day, again, January 1st, in the city, and he parked his car in his old neighborhood. He didn't live there anymore, but he parked his car there, jumped on the train at the Fern Rock train station, took that train into the town, did his training, mixing up 2 words here, but you know what I mean. Took it back to the Fern Rock station around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Walking back where his car was parked around the intersection of 7th and Madera Avenue, he's confronted by a guy in a yellow jacket and ask him for his money. Ray, you have some questions there. Why don't you walk me through them, even if we back up a little bit, and we'll go from there.
Jim, I know there were some issues on how this was looked at because it was handled differently in the beginning because of the circumstances. So if you can start with a brief overview of the initial police response to this and how it was handled. And not that it was handled in a bad way, Jim, because it wasn't. It was handled appropriately, but because of the way it was handled, a lot of information and valuable time was lost. Tell us about that.
Yeah, and I've learned this over the years. Well, let me just go a little bit more to the crime itself. A man approached Joe, and I'm going to describe him as a black male between 19 and 25 years of age, 5 foot 8 inches to 6 foot, and he was wearing some kind of a bright yellow coat and had on a baseball type cap. Through ballistics, it was determined he was carrying a cheap, what they used to call Saturday night special. And when he first asked Joe for the money, Joe just said, get out of here. And there's somehow like a 20 or 30 foot distance between them. The guy took a shot at Joe. And anyone who knows these types of 22 caliber weapons, they're not good for more than 5 or 10 feet in terms of accuracy. So that shot missed Joe. Then he came up closer. They started wrestling. They went to the ground. Joe was holding his own, but the guy had a gun in his hand, fired it. We won't get graphic here, but it incapacitated Joe. And the guy had Joe's wallet in it, and the guy ran 40 or 50 feet, dropped the wallet, and then kept running westbound on Madera Avenue towards the SEPTA, the Southeastern Pennsylvania Transit Authority train tracks, and that's the last he was seen. There was actually a priest. They had some kind of a rectory or something in that neighborhood, and he was looking out of a second floor window. He saw everything go down. He called the police. He went down, gave Joe his last rites, and then, Ray, to answer your question, Joe was still alive at the scene. He lived for another 3 weeks or so. And for that reason, it wasn't the homicide unit detectives who handled the crime. It was, uh, I think, Northeast detectives out of the 35th district. And it doesn't mean they're bad detectives, but they have dozens of other cases they're working, not just this attempted homicide, this robbery, uh, and uh, and they did the best they could. Finally, I visited Joe in the hospital. He was not in good shape. He could barely blink. He would blink his eyes to answer questions. And finally, at about the 23-day point, the doctors told the family he's not going to survive. He's only the machines are keeping him alive. And the priest and the other three siblings all decided to pull the plug, and Joe passed. Then it became a homicide, and homicide detectives got involved. And the initial detectives and later the homicide detectives did everything they could, but unfortunately, the case remains unsolved to this day. So, if any sort of administrative issue or perhaps blockage kicked in there. They didn't have the homicide detectives who could have devoted. Who wants to even say this? But if Joe had died right away at the scene, the homicide detectives could have worked it and maybe worked it for a week straight. Unfortunately, it was the district detectives, Northeast detectives,
Mhm.
and I think that's right, maybe Northwest detectives. But bottom line is they couldn't work it full time, and it just fell through the cracks. And 28 years later, that's not the case anymore, but we can come back to that as we move along here.
I want you to know, and I want our listeners to know that there's somebody else out there that he told about this. There's not a doubt in my mind. And there's not a doubt in my mind that he went to prison. And he could be in prison right now for all I know.
For something
And
else.
for something else. And he's talked about this to other prisoners in there. And people talk all kinds of crazy stuff when they're in there, but it gives them credibility. Well, I did this and I did that. So if you're thinking about something like this is something where, you know, you say it nonchalantly, like it's not a big deal, but it really is a big deal. And this is what I'm talking about, that Larry's organization, the Citizens Crime Commission, that little piece of information, you have no idea how valuable it can be when you're looking at something like this. And I just, the impact to the family, Jim, I mean, you're very close with the family, but they've been waiting decades for justice. What's that like for them?
Larry, are you going to say something here?
Yeah, I wanted to make a comment on what Ray said. Ray, you're absolutely right. There has to be someone that knows, and this person. This wasn't the first time at the rodeo for that individual. You know that they probably have been in and out of prison their whole life, and I'm sure they were in prison after they killed Joe Welsh. Conversations in prison, it makes you feel like a big man. You murdered someone, and people like to talk. They feel it's a badge of honor.
Yeah.
And we do a lot of work with the prisons, and we get information out of the prisons as well. So we have a contract with the prisons where we go in and we do training, and we also take information that the prisoners that are there have. And a lot of times the information coming from them is like, chasing your tail, because they're just giving you some wild story. But nonetheless, we take information from them, we vet it, and we move it forward to the police. So we try to get involved in all areas, to not just limit ourselves just to the general public. But if you're behind bars and you have information, you could participate in this program. Maybe you won't get the cash reward, but your family member may get it. So it really comes down to the credibility that you have with the information that you give us.
Well, let me ask you this, and I'm sure a lot of people out there are wondering, how the hell are you going to protect me? How are you going to protect my name, the information I give to you? Is anybody ever going to know that I gave you that information?
No, no, and that has been our cornerstone of success, because the only person that knows is Sandy and John and myself. That's it. When you call, we give you a number and we work off that number, and everything evolves around the number that we gave you. So you really will never, no one will really know who you are. We have had a tremendous amount of success with keeping people's identity confidential. And that's why people believe in us. And that's why we've had such a great run since 1954. And to be honest with you, The runway is long as far as I can see right now, so I don't see this organization shriveling up like a raisin. As a matter of fact, it's becoming more robust each and every week. So that's the one thing that separates us from any other organization is that people call us because, you have police departments that says, "Give us a call if you have information." They don't wanna call them. They could put those numbers out there all day and all night. They don't want they don't want people to know who they are. So that's why they come to us because there's a level of anonymity that they feel comfortable with, and so it's nice that the police departments ask the general public to call, but they know that if they call the police, their name's out there, they're gonna be in court, they're gonna be doing a lot of other things that they don't wanna do. So
Well, Larry,
that's what makes this work.
let me ask you this. You mean to tell me since 1954, 71 years, going on 72 years now, in all that time, there is not one name that slipped through, one
No,
person right now?
not one name, and
Oh,
I'm
that's good
telling
to
you
know.
that like I said, that is our cornerstone of success, that we could hold that up and say that we honor the code that we have and the promise that we make to the general public. As long as we could do that, we have confidence and trust that comes from them. And I will tell you this regarding Joe's murder, it's mind-boggling to think that this could happen broad daylight in the afternoon and it's unsolved. I mean, and we have witnesses, and I really think that the fact that the homicide group didn't get it right away was put a hitch in the giddy up there. And so I really feel that that really played a role here. And now here's the other piece, and I'll tell you this, and you guys are law enforcement people, you understand this. The information that we get now, we forward to the police. Sometimes we have to continue to push the envelope with the police departments at times because their resources are so small today.
Mhm.
Let's be honest with the George Floyd situation, the defunding of police. A lot of places took that to heart, and a lot of police officers are very concerned about how they operate today. So it really has affected the effectiveness of police departments and people who want to be police officers. Yeah, I applaud these people that go out there every day because if you look on social media, the situations police officers have to handle each and every day, God only knows how they keep their heads together, with cameras in their face and people screaming at them. It's a tough job. And so when you have that to deal with, you don't, you have a lot of fallout and you don't get support. And therefore the numbers that are available to work on some of these cases just ain't what they used to be. And so that's where we come in terms of trying to get more information from the individual that calls us and try to supply the police with maybe a little bit more of an insight into the situation so that we can maybe streamline a little bit of the process for them. So we understand the challenges they have and we support them and we work around those things to make sure that they have the ability to take this information and act upon it.
Jim, I want to move over to that question again, unless you want to say something, Jim, or you
No, I was
good?
going to answer your question about the Welsh family.
Yeah,
And
if you like to, I'd like to jump back to that.
yeah, they are a very close knit family, and they certainly were back then. And I was working in, as you know, Ray, Quantico at the time in the profiling unit. And I was just back from Unabomb. We were helping to prepare for the trial coming up, which never turned to a trial because he pleaded guilty, but we were still prepping for it. And I was barely off the plane and my pager's going off back then. And I call, friends, people, and did you hear about Joe Welsh? What? No. And of course, I finally found out. I called John. It was just a terrible day. And within a few days, well, Joe didn't die for another 3 weeks or so. Then, of course, the funeral was after that. It was very well attended. Joe had a lot of friends from high school, college, of course, the Philly Department of License and Inspection, the large Welsh family, and I was there. I felt kind of so. What I did, Ray, and you know how the profiling unit works. We're usually involved in if we're involved in a homicide case, it usually is some kind of a sex-related homicide or serial homicide in which behavior is exhibited at the scene. There is some, maybe elongated stretch of time. It could even be, half hour or an hour, and that's where profilers really have their skill sets. And why did the offender do this? Why did he approach the victim this way, that way? This was a basic street robbery, and it was a street robbery that went very bad. And quite frankly, profiling skill sets don't really play as much into these types of crimes as they would where, again, more psychological, sexually related issues are involved. So, so I ran this case by my supervisors back then and say, I want to go up and help the Philly PD. They said, Fitz, we feel for your friend being shot, eventually dying, but this, it's not really what profilers do. I said, I don't care. I want to go. Um, and I went up with another profiler, and we met the Philly PD. We went to the crime scene, 7th and Maderi, went down by the train tracks where the guy ran. They had searched there earlier looking for the weapon, never found. They did find the wallet of Joe's wallet that the perpetrator had handled. They also took the baseball cap, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But anyway, it was that night was the funeral, and my buddy, the other FBI agent, didn't know Joe. He stayed in the car. I ran in. I felt kind of guilty cutting in line, but the Welsh family knew, why I was there. Obviously to pay respects for Joe, but to also work the case. And I had all the Welsh brothers and the father right there. The mother was deceased. And I swore to them, Ray and Larry, I said, I'm going to do everything in my power and the FBI's power to solve this case. And I did work with the Philly PD. Ray, do you remember I called you about this?
Mm-hmm. Yes,
and
you
we
did.
won't get into details, but there's like an informant list. You checked everyone and other agents who have informants. Does anyone know about the Joe Welsh homicide? And we reached a blank on that back then.
Jim, I look at this and I look at we look at the profiling aspect, but we just look at old-fashioned investigative common sense. And we always know that when individuals commit offenses, it's usually in a place that's familiar to them. It's not somewhere where they go, well, I've never been here before, because their exit, they want to make sure they can get away. That's the whole purpose of committing a crime, is getting away with it. Otherwise, why commit it? And so it tells me that either this guy had a familiarity with this area, and whether he worked there or whether he used to live in that area or whether he had a girlfriend in that area, there was something that drew him to that area. And I wish, we can go back 28 years, Jim, and kind of have a chance to do this. I wish I had a time machine where I can go back and do this, because knowing what I know now versus what I knew then is like night and day, And I gotta ask you, Jim, I know how I would feel, but the psychological toll on you. I mean, it's a case involving someone that, it's family to you too.
Well, I helped solve some of the biggest cases of the end of the 20th century and early into the 21st century, except this one that really means the most to me. I mean, they all were important to me, don't get me wrong, but this is the one victim, Joe, that I knew. I knew personally. I hung out with him in bars, and we parties together, and he was at my house. And through his brother, we were in the wedding together, as groomsmen. And it was just so difficult, certainly psychologically, but it really taught me, and I'm sure Larry and Ray, you can somehow relate to this, but it's one thing looking at these cases coldly and objectively, and that's not a bad thing. You need people to do that, and not be, tainted at all with any sort of over level of emotionality. But for the first time in my life, I mean, I knew, my friend Bob Yezi was killed in the Ben Salem Police Department. That's coming up on almost 50 years, hard to believe. But and he was a friend, but all the cases I've worked, basically, I didn't know the victims. And this was the one case I did, and by no means was I in charge of it. But the one extra thing I did, this was the early days of DNA, and there was a baseball cap, as I said, left behind at the scene. So the Philly PD wanted it checked for DNA, but at that time, it was only the FBI lab doing it, and the FBI lab was only taking cases in which they'd have evidence from a crime scene, but they would only take cases in which it could be matched up with a suspect,
With known suspect.
swab, whatever,
Yeah.
and known suspect. And we didn't have that in this case. But I still wanted to know, as the Philly PD, was there DNA on this hat? I had to call the unit chief and actually got kind of in an argument with her. I forget her name after all these years. But I said, look, and then finally I backed down. Look, I didn't mean to get upset. This is a personal friend of mine. All I want you to do is put this on the front of the list so we can tell the Philly PD if this is worth pursuing from a DNA perspective. Those results came back, and I'm not going to get any details about that. But let's just say the Philly PD is back on this case. They are going over all the information from back then, and they're looking at a bunch of new stuff. And I'm helping them with that. And that's starting really with this podcast tonight, Crime Stoppers over this next weekend, all around the January 1998, the 28-year anniversary, which is actually tomorrow as we record this. By the way, that was a Wednesday. For what it's worth, anyone out there who may have any memories
Tomorrow's a
of that
Wednesday.
day and this person, and actually tomorrow is the 21st, it'll be another Wednesday, 28 years later. And we're hoping now we're finally going to be able to get something together with this $25,000 reward. And you guys talked about someone in prison. No one here on this podcast can make a deal, but anybody with any street savvy out there knows you're in prison, you're serving time, you have information about a homicide. Guess what? You can work yourself out a deal with the DA's office, whomever, to get the right person
Well, I'll tell you, Jim,
behind bars for this case. Go ahead, Larry.
Jim, I feel for you because normally when you deal with that type of a crime, you're level removed, and you weren't. You had the scab ripped right off of you, and so you didn't have the benefit of that. So in terms of having intestinal fortitude and keeping your wits about you, I'm sure you did it, but I'm sure it was very challenging because, you're the ultimate professional, and so naturally you have to model that from a leadership standpoint. I will tell you this, that it airs this week on Channel 6 in the Philadelphia area, and I'll give you a commitment, Jim, that Sandy John and myself will keep his file, Joe's file, on the top of our pile of folders. It's not gonna go to the bottom, it's not gonna go to the middle, it's gonna stay on top, and we're gonna continue to work this, and we're gonna continue to talk about it, and if we get a call, regardless of where it's from, if it's from the prisons, John and Sandy will jump all over this at a blink of an eye and go and talk to the person and extract the information that the police will need to get this thing resolved. So, you got that commitment from me and Sandy and John, so we are right there in lockstep with you.
Larry, thank you on behalf of me, but more importantly, on behalf of the Welsh family, and it's an extended family now with, nephews and grandchildren involved of the family members. So they will appreciate this very much.
Larry, I know
Ray?
we talked about some information that the commission might be able to render and pass on. Is there any specific types of information that you could share with our audience, like forensics, eyewitness, overheard conversations, anything like that the commission might be interested in?
Well, listen, naturally, from an eyewitness standpoint or from a social communication standpoint where people talk to each other, that's where it starts for us. Once we have some contact with an individual who says they know something or someone told them, naturally, there's got to be work done in terms of hunting it down. And from that point, then we spread out in terms of trying to find forensics and working with the police to get a little bit more detail over the tools that are available to us to support that information, which we have vetted that we believe is credible. But the thing is, we have to really sift through the communication that we get to make sure we're just not chasing our tail or we're sending the police on a wild goose chase. Because if we do that, we lose credibility with the law enforcement group, and that's the one thing that we don't want to do because, like I said, people pick our phone calls up when we call. So it's not who you know, it's who knows you in terms of getting things done.
Ray, I'm going to maybe bring this thing to a close here. I want to once again put the description out and even a little bit of the profile that we put together with my fellow associates in the profiling unit. And I know you were a part of this too back in the day. So again, the description of the shooter is a black male between 19 and 25 years of age, between 5'8" and 6 foot, wearing back then a bright yellow jacket, and he was using a relatively cheap Saturday night special weapon, 22 caliber semi-automatic, which has not been recovered. He was wearing a baseball cap of some sort at the time. Putting the profile together, and again, it's not the strength of profilers looking at street crimes, because a lot of them are just quick hit and run of one way or another. But I will add that this guy probably was hooked up on drugs of some sort, and he may have even been coming down or in some sort of desperate or semi-desperate need of a hit, and that's why he saw this guy Joe, not a small guy and a guy in decent shape. So it was, and in a neighborhood, East Oak Lane was not a high crime neighborhood. It's actually an affluent neighborhood, maybe even still today, mostly old single homes. It wasn't the row home area. Joe just happened to park his car there because the streets they're small streets, but not many cars parked there. They all have long driveways. So this was a high risk crime for potentially low benefit. I mean, Joe could have just been carrying his car fare or his train fare money with him, or $10 or $20. But this guy was willing to put it all on the line. Fires a shot, and then finally wrestles with Joe, who could take care of himself. But when someone else has a gun, that guy definitely has the advantage. And he shot Joe, and Joe went down. He took his wallet, runs away, drops the wallet, and one of our childhood friends' fathers actually found the wallet, turned it over to the police once the priest called about what had happened. And all I will add is, I gave the physical description. This guy was hooked up on drugs. I don't think he was that experienced of a criminal,
I
of a
agree.
violent crime, armed robber, because he would have handled this better. He could have snuck up on Joe, give me the money now, and just run off. But he made the confrontation, and he put distance between them somehow, much more difficult than it ever had to be. So I have no doubt this guy served jail time before and after. Who knows if he was scared straight somehow? Who knows what his conscience is like? He no doubt had a girlfriend back then or some buddies, siblings. And all I can say, 28 years later, sometimes it's people don't have the allegiance to these perps that they used to have. They were a big tough guy back then, or had connections with other people. Now this guy is around 50 years of age, late 40s, early to mid 50s. So try to think of someone who maybe knew how to ride SEPTA, maybe knew the Fern Rock train station area, to Upper Olney, East Oak Lane, had a yellow jacket, yellow coat of some sort, and of course, a little under 6 feet tall, 18 to or 19 to 25, anywhere in there. And folks, if you're out there, there's a $25,000 reward with the arrest and conviction. I'll never have to know your name. You can do it through the Citizens Crime Commission, and let's get this thing done. Let's do it for the Welsh family. Let's do it for Joe. Let's just do the right thing here and get this case resolved. Joe and his family deserve it after all these years.
I just
Agreed.
want to say we've posted all these details that Jim just spoke about, and we posted the Citizens Crime Commission tip line, the reward breakdown, and all the case facts on our blog at coldredpodcast.com. If you know something, please don't let another year go by. Make the call. Let's finally bring Joe home and give his family peace that they've earned.
Larry, any last words? One more time, the website for
We
Crime
stand
Commission?
ready. www.citizenscrimecommission.delawarevalley.com. I'm sorry, .org. .org. I will tell you that we stand ready to take on any information and vet it out and communicate it to the police department. Sandy and John are well experienced law enforcement individuals. When it comes to working with police, they know the secret handshake, and so they get all the cooperation that we need. So we are well equipped to handle any information that comes our way. Please, if someone's out there that knows it, reach out to us on our tip line, and we will be more than happy to work with you to get information and keep you informed of the steps that we're taking to vet your information and see that this thing gets to the right people in the police department and that action can be taken. So Please keep this up front in your minds. And when you see this again on Channel 6 on Saturday, I hope that it just maybe moves you a little bit to pick up the phone and give us a call and give us information that you may know, because I'm sure there's somebody out there that knows a little bit of something that could turn that little bit of something into something bigger. That's what we're experts at doing. So call us.
And yeah, to say the least, we'll have it on our own website. Ray already said it. I'm trying to draw up the UPVI. Of course, it's not readily right here. But yeah, 6abc.com is the local station you can watch. I know not we have some listeners of Cold Red in the Philly area, but not everyone. So if you're listening from anywhere else in the country, even around the world, you know someone in Philly, direct them to the Crime Commission website you just heard, Citizens Crime Commission, or 6abc.com, and look for the Crime Stoppers part of it. So again, Larry Sechuk, I want to thank you for being our guest tonight and all the great work you and your colleagues are doing at the Citizens Crime Commission. And I hope many more cases are solved. And let's hope the case of Joe Welsh's homicide is one of the next ones to actually be resolved. So, Ray, thank you for being my friend and partner here in this particular case and this particular episode. Not an easy one for me. But everyone else out there, thanks for listening or watching this episode of Cold Red. Check us out on coldredpodcast.com, on our various social media sites, and subscribe to us, like us, all those type things. Thanks to our producers, Matt McLaughlin, Matt Robinson, and to our music coordinator, Rick Schilling. And everyone, thanks again for listening. Let's make this call for Joe Welsh's sake and his family's sake. I would appreciate it personally. Larry, you have something to add?
I just want to make sure that we're clear with the communication piece for us. Our tip line, which is so critically important for people to know, it's 215-546-TIPS. That's 215-546-TIPS. And it's 8477. That would spell TIPS. So that is an important number for you to have. And please give us a call. Let us know what you know, and we will work with you. So thank you for giving me this moment. And I want to tell you, John and Ray, Jim and Ray, you guys are tremendous. I mean, the experience that you bring to the table from a law enforcement background is so impressive. And for me to be on this podcast with you, I'm humbled. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. And everyone else out there, thank you for listening or watching this episode of Cold Red. And we will see you next time. And hopefully down the line, we'll have some results to report back about this particular case of Joe Welsh. Thanks again, everyone. See you next time.